For the last little while, I've had a mystery to solve. See, I am a very large fan of a particular show based on a popular visual novel called Higurashi, and several years back there was an adaptation of that novel's pseudo-sequel, as it were. It takes place in the same universe, but with different characters, different plot, and an all-around different story. Now, back when this new show came out, I was rather excited! A sequel is a sequel is a sequel. Now, I was perfectly happy with how Higurashi ended, but then this would have been a way for me to have a sequel without sort of tainting the original ending of the already existing show, though that happened later anyway. And when it did come out, I watched several episodes, but ultimately decided to put it on hold for a while. Not because I thought it was bad at the time, but because I wanted to save it to when I have some time to just marathon the whole thing, possibly with a notebook in hand, and try to solve whatever mystery the show has for me before the show actually tells it to me. Because that's something I like to do. Because it is a mystery show. A supernatural mystery, sure, but a mystery nonetheless. So I put it on hold. And it wasn't until recently that I decided to pick it back up again. And why is that? Because I found that it was very rare to meet someone who had watched this show from beginning to end and not attempt to tell me how pissed off it made them whenever it came up in conversation. So yes, I had a mystery to solve. Why did this show piss off so many people? But solving this mystery is rather easy. All I had to do was sit down and watch it. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arkada, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Today, Umineko no Naku Koro ni. Let's jam! The year is 1986. A wealthy Japanese business family is taking a trip to one of their owned family mansions that exists on an island in the middle of nowhere. What is the purpose of this trip? Well, from the outside it seems like the typical, I haven't seen the extended family in a while, so let's catch up kind of meeting. But it's a bit more devious than that. The current head of the family is dying, and everyone has gathered to find out how the family fortune will be divided. But at this meeting, the family head refuses to see anyone, and at dinner they receive a mysterious letter from someone claiming to be a witch called Beatrice. In the letter, she points the family to an old epitaph, a riddle leading to the rumored pile of gold once given to their father many years prior. And if they don't solve the riddle and find the gold, Beatrice will kill them all. What seems to be a cruel joke turns very real when suddenly members of the family start dying from seemingly supernatural causes, and it's up to one lone member of the family, Battler, to discover the real meaning behind the murders. Spoilers! He doesn't. Now you might be wondering, what's the catch? What is the interesting thing that this show does? Higurashi had the seemingly never-ending time loop, so does Umineko have something similar? Now, normally I realize that it is not necessarily fair to make direct comparisons between two different shows. But in this case, considering that both Higurashi and Umineko are technically part of the same series, as it were, the comparison is not only justified, it's absolutely needed. One of Higurashi's greatest narrative points was how it was able to take a variety of different universes, or time loops, and use those to tell a multitude of different stories while also pushing along the show's overall core mystery. Now, the universes were separated from each other, and when you were watching a particular arc, that was the story you were watching. Sure, keep the earlier stories in mind, but that's not the focus right now. The focus is on the story of that arc. And that setup, it worked great. Umineko, on the other hand, keeps the variety of different universes, but then adds spectators. The characters of Battler and Beatrice have omnipotent counterparts that observe the different universes as they progress, with Battler trying hand over fist to prove that, based on the information given, witches do not exist. The problem with this setup is that it is boring as all hell. Throughout the majority of the scenes they share together, nothing ever gets accomplished besides them both bickering at each other. Neither takes a victory or defeat at all from these minor verbal spats, and it usually just takes away from any semblance of a story that is occurring in each arc. Not only that, but it does nothing to help progress the show's overall mystery, to the point where I cannot stand here in good conscience and tell you what that mystery actually is. I lost it somewhere between Beatrice and Battler sipping tea and shouting "OBJECTION!" at each other. The hardest thing, though, is actually trying to piece together what it is you're watching. Several times during the show, it is implied that the supernatural events which we, the viewers, are witnessing did not actually happen, at least not the way we're shown. Since Battler is trying to prove that witches do not exist, you feel like eventually they will just be able to explain everything away with science or something, and that what you are actually watching is just some elaborate story that Beatrice is telling. But then, the quote-unquote magic also occurs outside the loop in other scenes where Beatrice has no control, which doesn't make a lot of sense. The show, I feel, should be telling us that magic does not actually exist, or, if it does, then Beatrice is not using it to commit murder. Because otherwise it seems like Battler's entire fight is just boring and a complete waste of time. Instead, though, the show prefers to keep everything extremely vague and unsatisfying for all parties involved. This is a rough section to talk about. Not because any individual character is tough to discuss. In fact, most of them can be rather quickly summarized. The problem is that there are so freaking many of them. The show starts off with over 18 characters. Yeah, over 18. This includes all members of the family, several servants, and Beatrice herself. And that was bad enough, to be honest, but with every new loop, the show decides to introduce even more characters, and sometimes not just one or two either. We have Beatrice's large posse of female demonic servants, her demonic butler, and a slew of other witches include one who may or may not be somehow related to the character of Rika from Higurashi. Some of those witches, of course, have their own servants as well, and if that wasn't enough, we also have alternate versions of existing characters that are themselves their own character, and this possibly includes our main character, Battler. At least it seems like he does. While Beatrice seems to be in control of both her in-universe avatar, as well as the one that is observing everything with Battler in what appears to be a tea parlor, Battler himself seems to be almost two separate entities. Though it is never truly apparent, as neither does anything the other would not, and it's only in the ignorance that the in-universe Battler displays that makes me have this assumption. What this means is that Battler is always at a disadvantage in the mind game between the two. While with each new loop, Beatrice has the ability to change things and swing things in her favor, Battler can only observe and attempt to find contradictions. Now, you may be wondering why I'm focusing so much on this when I should probably be talking about all the characters as a whole, but please keep in mind that this is more or less Battler's sole purpose for existing. The rest of the cast varies between three types: those who get no screen time, so we honestly have no idea who these people are, those who get some solo time in one arc but then are quickly killed in another, and finally those who have a somewhat decent amount of time in most arcs. However, the show just does not seem to know when to stop adding new characters and start building up the characters we already know. Because of this, some characters who exist in the show from episode 1 have no characterization. For example, while we spend quite a bit of time with both Maria and George's parents, being Rosa and Eva, very little time is actually spent on Battler's two parents, Rudolph and Kairi, which is odd considering you think that their deaths in particular would be a major focal point in Battler's motivation. While on the onset, the show does look rather pretty, ultimately, the actual animation of the show is rather limited. As more emphasis is placed on telling the plot rather than showing, what we get is a lot of talking heads and not a lot of actual movement. The colors as well are also done in a very muted way, like a printer running out of color ink and just substituting everything with a little bit more black. I'd like to say that even some of the magical special effects were impressive, but I really can't. While it did have a bit more motion to it, the closest we get to impressive is when they decide to use 3D animation to offset everything, and that never truly works out. The soundtrack is probably the only part where I have little to no complaints, mainly because the tone of the music is consistent with the kind of show that Umineko is, even if the plot hasn't figured that part out yet. There are lots of somber orchestrations, piano solos, and most importantly, an eerie vocal choir, which is most notably used in the show's opening, which, if you couldn't figure it out from one of my previous videos, the top anime openings list, is pretty freaking amazing. It really does its best to make you hyped for the episode to come, and was definitely not something I skipped through if I could avoid it. Good thing too is there are slight changes in the opening with every new arc, usually with character additions and a change to the main painting that is the focal point at the start. It's one of the few shows that I know of that actually does that, and it's a nice touch considering that the opening song is just that good. I wanted to like this show. Truly, I did. There is so much about it that makes me want to like it, but I just can't. It spends all this time dealing with murder, impossible closed rooms, magical means of death, all of that. Very interesting stuff, if done right. But at the end of the day, none of it mattered. You have Battler give this rousing speech, pulling answers basically out of his ass, and until suddenly you're just like, oh, look at that. I need to pull out the next disc in order to see what happens. Well, guess what? There is no next disc. See, now Higurashi did something similar to this. At the end of Higurashi's first season, not everything was really resolved. It did do an okay job at wrapping some of it up, but ultimately it was unfinished. But then they had a second season that covered the rest of the story and answered everything. Umineko doesn't have that. It is an unfinished story that has very little hope of an adaptation for its second part, the reasoning for which is twofold. Firstly, the show did poorly in Japan, which isn't actually surprising considering that. Secondly, this first season was released before the game that it is based off of was actually finished. This in turn probably led to the people who were adapting this first part to leave out key points of plot that at the time they did not realize were really necessary for the second half. So really what we have now is sort of an OVA that's just kind of like a bonus to fans of the game, who probably don't want to watch it anyway because they'll just play the game that actually has a completed story to it, you know? And of course, the people who just watch the anime, namely moi, are shit out of luck as usual. So now what's the recommendation here? Well, honestly, I can't recommend streaming the show, not that you could even if you wanted to. So it's been a while, but honestly, fuck it. If you are a true fan of Higurashi and are slightly interested in the story of Umineko at all, which honestly, you should be, because if nothing else, the premise is great. If that is the case, what you should do is try to grab a copy of the game and an unofficial English patch until such time that an official release is made. If it ever is. If, however, you really just want a physical copy of the show, perhaps for the pretty box art, then I suppose I should inform you that at the time of this video, Umineko no Naku Koro has been licensed and is available in North America from NIS America. Oddly enough, only in Blu-ray format. No DVDs, which is odd. Regardless, though, for ultimate anime recommendations, I point you towards the very obvious Higurashi no Naku Koro because if you haven't watched it yet, you need to get on that. Seriously. Also, in all seriousness, the entirety of Phoenix Wright. Yes, the video game series. I know it's not an anime, but by God does it not fit as a good recommendation for this show. Now, of course, if you want a second anime, however, go out and try Ghostic for a show with a similar feel, but with better animation and a more concise, if still not perfect, plot. Between all of those, you should hopefully find something to your liking. And that's it for me. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, follow me on Twitter if you feel so inclined, and hey, if you like what I do here and feel like helping out, please consider checking out my Patreon page, and consider setting up for a donation. Very special thanks to Samuel R., Tyler Morse, Cody Nelson, and Damian H. Echeverria for donating already. You guys are amazing! Kermit Flail! So until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.